Hello, Rebels. Welcome, Raw Rebel Talk, episode 58, Mrs. Red. I decided to do an upload, so I'm sorry that I'm running a little bit behind today, but I wanted you guys to have the full story and no glitches or anything happening during the story I'm about to tell you guys. Now, to get right into it, I met Mrs. Red uh, the first time I met her wasn't in person. I met her through the phone. And you might be familiar with this story a little bit. But anyways, the first time I talked to her, she was basically trying to tell me to back off of her boyfriend. Um and I guess she was just trying to be she was overprotecting her boyfriend or whatever. So, um, which was it was okay. I guess how I felt about her at the time, I didn't have no feelings. I just felt like I can relate to her situation because I've been there before. Um, then the next meeting that we had was over the phone as well. And this time she called and she was a bit sad. She was crying because I guess she had more confusion because me and her boyfriend were talking a lot more. And she seemed like I was very sympathetic for her and I felt bad for her. So um, I helped her by trying to tell her exactly what I think somebody in her situation wanted to hear. Um, but at the same time, I mean, not that I lied, because I didn't lie to her. I think I told her the straight up, honest truth. But I just felt really bad because of the situation that she was in, um, with me, her boyfriend, and her. And anyways, I'm gonna skip ahead because I'm pretty sure you guys heard pretty much most of the story. And plus, I'm on borrowed time because the uploads. I don't want to have most of the uploads be split into two different videos. So, um, um, what's it called? So, if you can't tell by now who this is, obviously it's Mr. Yellow's girl. Mrs. Red is Mr. Yellow's girl. So, yeah. So, uh, Mrs. Red and I got officially acquainted um, back when, like, after I think after a year, maybe after a year after the initial phone call, we kind of got acquainted and we met in person. Now, when we met in person, I, like I said, I don't know. I still didn't have like any feelings like towards her. Like my whole intention was to try to get to know her and try to see um, what would come of it. Like I remember being having my guard up most of the time because I didn't know what to expect. And I didn't know who she was, so I was like had my guard up, and I think she could tell. But she she was very, but we were very cordial. We were very cordial with one another, and we had a nice conversation before then. We were talking about Mr. Yellow, and then um, she that's when she told me that Mr. Yellow was beating her, and that's when I immediately felt sympathetic. And honestly, to this day, I never know if that was taken advantage of or not, my sympathy, but I feel like as if she she needed help in some shape or form. She needed help to get away from him, so I did the best I could. Um, so we went over to Mr. Yellow's. That's when Mrs. Red and I and Mr. Yellow all kind of got into like the big squabble or whatever. But later on that day, um, after the police were called, and then called the police, and then the police came, and the police didn't do anything. Me and Mrs. Red went to go hang out. So we were in downtown Orlando, and we went to like some rooftop bar or whatever, and we went up there and we had some drinks, and she got really drunk. Not so, well, she did. She got really drunk. Um, but I cared for her because at that point, I felt more close. I felt closer to her. I felt like she wasn't somebody I had to put my guard up with anymore. I felt a little bit more closer to her. So I took more better care of her, and I made sure she got taken care of. I mean, she got drunk out of her mind, but I still took care of her. I still made sure we got her back home safe, which sucked because by the time I got back home, she ended up she ended up running back into Mr. Red or Mr. Yellow. My bad, Mr. Yellow. um so when that happened and I left her because the cops showed up and the cops told me I was gonna get into trouble because I was trespassing. So I had to leave. I called her on the phone. I told her to try to find some place else to stay. Um, and then I guess it just kind of sucked because I found out like the next day, the following day, that she blacked out or whatever, and she said that she had woke up and she was naked on the bed. So I don't know exactly what happened. I don't know if she knows exactly what happened, but um I felt like shit for leaving her in that situation. Um because I feel like as if I kind of failed her, but at the same time I tried my best. I tried my very fucking best that I almost got arrested. And God knows I don't want to end up back in handcuffs again. So I tried my very best to the point where I was almost arrested. But it drained a lot out of me because I I well, that was the same night I had got choked. I got choked too. So it drained a lot out of me. So I had came to the decision that I didn't want to talk to Miss Yellow, Miss Red, or Mr. Yellow again. Definitely not Mr. Yellow again, but Miss Red, because her situation was so. It was. I felt bad, but at the same time, I didn't. There was only so much I could do to try to help her out of that situation. So I told her that. I told her that that I did my best and that I can't talk to her anymore until she gets it together. Um, which I don't remember what she said. I think she like agreed or whatever, or she understood. But I feel like I gave her that push to try to get herself together. Um, so um, what's it called? So I ended up taking a break from her for like a couple months because I ended up hearing back from her again later down the road when me and Mr. Yellow ended up talking again. But this time it was more so like sweeter. He was a lot more sweeter. He was a lot more kinder. or no, this was no. I'm sorry that I'm getting my timeline screwed up. My bad. This is a while ago, so forgive me. Anyways, no. So when this, I ended up talking to her a couple months later because the reason I was talking to her in the beginning was because, or that reason we met was because I was supposed to move in with her and Mr. Yellow. That was the plan that I had in my head, or something like that, something along the lines like that. We were supposed to be in a throuple. We were supposed to be a throuple. That's what my plan was, and kind of like her plan too. Something along that we had. She had mentioned like that. She had mentioned that she wanted me to sleep with him, so we decided we were gonna meet. That's how come we met in the first place. But anyways, so obviously that got all blown out of proportion or blah 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 when we first met. So moving on because I'm so blah. Moving on. The Mrs. Red then Mrs. Red and I stopped talking until I moved to Orlando. When I moved to Orlando, then I had invited her back into my life again. At this point, she had told me, and the only reason I talked to her again was because she had told me that of, she moved away from Mr. Yellow. So her and Mr. Yellow were no longer talking or whatever. So I decided, okay, cool. So then I'll allow her to be my friend again. So this time I went to go meet her for dinner. We went to go meet and we talked for a little bit. Still didn't know her that well, and because of the situation, I had my guard back up again. So I felt like as if I just wanted to see where it was gonna go. So she confirmed that she wasn't talking to him no more or whatever, whatever. So I guess I don't know. I don't know what happened, but I guess how I felt was having her back in my life kind of made me want to talk to him again. So I ended up uh, trying to reach out to him, but I asked her first. We started hanging out more. Me and Miss Red started hanging out some more. So me and her were like spending more time together. We went to like bars and stuff, and then I don't know if we went to the nightclub. I'm pretty sure, or we did go to the nightclub. So we did some dancing, boom, and then she spent the night at my apartment. Now this is where it gets weird because, or not weird, but this is where I started to get like more attached. I think the night she had spent at my apartment, she slept in my bed, and I felt attracted to her in a way where I wanted to do something, but I wasn't sure if it was a good move to do it, so I didn't. But I really wanted to. Um, and that that was that was like one night. Then I think, like I said, after that I got confused a little bit. I guess I wanted to speak to Mr. Yellow, so I asked her if it was okay, and she seemed like it was fine. Like she said she said it's okay, it's fine, whatever you want to do, do it. He's not my problem anymore or something like that. So so I reached out to Mr. Yellow, who then reached out to me because in my mind I found her attractive. I found him attractive, so I wanted the throuple to still continue. That was still my wish. So, um, me and Mrs. Red still hung out. And then I think I ended up seeing Mr. Yellow for one night and we had sex, and then it got back to Mrs. Red. Mrs. Red was supposed to, but I had found out from Mr. Yellow that Mrs. Red was still meeting with him. So him and Mrs. Red were still meeting up. So it kind of like, once again, made me feel like as if I don't know Mrs. Red that well. So I had put up my guard up again, and I was like trying to figure out what was going on. So I asked Miss Red what was going on. She was saying, then this is where it gets confusing, because then I was talking to both of them through text message, and both of them were saying the opposite things, and it was like, I don't know who to believe. So I asked for us all to sit down in a meeting. I talked to Mr. Yellow. Mr. Yellow was in. He said he'll sit down in a meeting. Um, and then Mrs. Red said she'll sit down in a meeting. So then the day before the meeting, or the day of the meeting, Miss Red texted me a long text message saying that she doesn't want to sit down because she's afraid of what's going to happen, because the last time we all sat down together, so she was afraid of what was going to happen. Um, which is understandable. I was furious. I was so pissed. I was like, I felt like as if now I didn't know who to trust, and I felt like a lot of what Mr. Yellow was saying about her was right, which he was saying that she was an instigator and that she was a liar and stuff like that. So a lot of my feelings were starting to feel like as if maybe Mr. Yellow was right about her. Um, which I didn't want to believe it because she seemed like a great person. She seemed like opposite of that. So, uh, Miss Miss Red, I just told Miss Red, that's fine, whatever. Um, and then I don't know, we had like strained conversation between then. And then, as far as I remember, her and Mr. Yellow got back together, and I had called that Mr. Yellow over and over again, trying to get in contact with him. And then she answered the phone saying that he's not gonna talk to me, and that basically that she's his man or whatever, and then um that that if I want to talk to him, what do I need to talk to him for or whatever. So I was asking for closure. So she called. She said okay, she'll get him on the phone. So once he got on the phone, I just asked him what's up, and then he said not to leave him alone. And then I was like okay. And ever since then, I pretty much left him alone. I haven't messed with him since. Um, Now that was when I was still in Orlando. So pretty much pretty much that severed our relationship. All three of us, all three of our relationships pretty much severed it. We didn't talk for a long time after that. Um, I'm not even sure when I got back in contact with Mrs. Red again. Honestly, I think I think Mrs. Red and I didn't talk until like a while later, and this is after I met Mr. Green. I think I had called her up during the time that me and Mr. Green were going through our big gigantic fight or whatever, and I had asked her to come and get me because they were kicking me out. They were kicking me out of the, and she she came. She came to get me. She drove from Orlando and came all the way to Ocala to come get me because I guess we were friends again. And at this point, she comforted me. She gave me she gave me some songs to listen to. She told me it was gonna be okay. She was very 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 supportive of what I was going through. Um then uh what's it called? Then after that, we were pretty much back on good terms again. Uh I mean, I was still going through stuff, so I didn't want to bring her through it. So we were back on good terms. Then what's it called? Then our relationship was pretty much average, like like your average relationship or whatever, where you just kind of talk to them people over the phone, or you chit chat or whatever over the phone or whatever. So she would check in on me every now and then. I would say check in on her or whatever. Um, then what's it called? I don't know. As far as my feelings for her, they were just they were French. They were just um cordial. They weren't more than that. They weren't romantic because I didn't feel that way towards her anymore. Um then fast forward a little bit. Uh she ended up getting a place with Mr. She moved out to Atlanta. She moved out to Atlanta when we were doing pretty good. I would come visit her in Orlando. I would come visit her in Orlando sometimes. And then she ended up getting a place in Atlanta um, for her job, or she just ended up getting her own place in Atlanta. She ended up breaking up from Mr. Yellow, obviously. But she ended up getting her own place in Atlanta, with her friend. Um, uh, she she had she had her own business, so she was actually doing very well for herself. She had got her own business started. Um, she started taking the proper steps to taking care of herself. She was doing very well. She was blossoming very well. She got um she got her own place in Atlanta, so she was doing that she lived out there for a while. So we were very back and forth a little bit. Um and then to fast forward it up a little bit, she ended up moving back to Orlando because Mr. Yellow got in an accident. This is more recent. Mr. Yellow had gotten an accident. Um, and Mrs. Red was taking care of him because she cared about him. I did too. Part of me was mad at first or didn't care at first, and then a part of me felt really bad and felt like, damn, like he could have been dead. He almost did die. Um, so it kind of sucked. Um, but she had moved into his place in Orlando. So I came to visit. This is when I started living out of my car. So this is recent. I started living out of my car. So Mrs. Red and I would visit Mrs. Red to check in on her and see how she's doing. She would say that he was doing good. Mr. Yellow was doing good and treating her right this time, and everything prior to uh or post post the accident, and little coma that he had. So she helped him by his bedside. The weird thing though is when I wanted to visit Mr. Yellow, she never let me for some strange odd reason. I don't know what the hell that was about, but I wanted to visit him in the hospital and she'd never let me do that. I have some weird feelings about that, but it's whatever. Um uh so Mr. Mr. I'm sorry, Mrs. Red and I were still cool. Um, then everything pretty much just seemed cool. Then I had disappeared for a while on her. And honestly, this is because of the time that I was going through my this is when I was going through my phase with my bipolar disorder cuz I didn't know at this time I was bipolar. I still didn't or I didn't come to terms with it that well. So I had ended up uh like I ended up um freaking what's it called? I ended up not talking to her for a while because well, part of me it was bipolar disorder, but another part of me felt like as if I wasn't put on like her friend radar like the rest of her friends. Like she glorified the rest of her friends, but not me. When I felt like as if I was owed a lot more because I was the one that was there for her during the time of need the most. But whatever. Um, I spoke to her about it afterwards when I finally came back into her life. Um, but other than that, now we're pretty good. We're on the same page. We check in every once in a while. Um, we don't have any hard feelings about one another. I'm cool with her. She's my best friend. She's one of my best friends. I would call. I know I could rely on her if I needed to call on her for something. She would help me out. Even though I don't. I try not to. Honestly, I try not to bother her because I know she's a busy woman and she has a lot on her plate. She does so much as far as working wise and stuff like that. So I try not to bother her so much because I respect her as a woman that I'm not going to do that to her. And I love her. I love her like I love every one of my characters. Every one of my characters. I love you guys, but I'm gonna cut it short because I think I just went over the time limit for my damn videos, so I was probably gonna be split in two. But oh well, I'm doing this for y'all. Um, and then next week will be Mr. White. Mr. White. Next week will be Mr. White. Um, and that'll be that one. I'll see you guys next week. All right. Spread love. Think for yourself. Live free. Bye. Bye.